Well, good evening and welcome to the eCommerce podcast. My name is Matt Edmondson. It's great that you're here. Great that you're on the live stream if you're watching this, or maybe you're watching the catch-up video. Either way, welcome. This is just a little preamble from me letting you know what's going to happen. We are going to be recording the show, right? We have a podcast called the eCommerce podcast. We live stream the recording of that podcast, which is what this is all about. So this is basically me just doing one of those little tech checks to make sure everything's working as it should, which it is, which is great. So without further ado, I'm going to start the podcast. So I'm just going to play a little bit of the podcast intro music. Then I'm going to introduce the podcast and we are going to get right into it. So don't go anywhere. We're going to have some fun with this one. Here we go.
Welcome to the eCommerce podcast with Matt Edmondson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Well, hello and welcome to the eCommerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Whether you are starting out or whether you're a bit like me and have been around for a while in the world of e-commerce, my goal is simply this, is to help you grow your e-commerce and digital businesses. And to do that, every week I get to talk to amazing people from the world of e-commerce and ask them, all kinds of questions about what they know, how it's going to help us, and how it's going to help us grow online. I say that I try and have the conversation that you would have if you got to sit down and have coffee with them. Oh yes, that's what it's like. I'm really keen to dig into their story, learn the principles that can help us all start and adapt and grow online. Because like you, I run my own e-commerce businesses. So I'm very keen to learn, let me tell you. So if you enjoy this episode, I would appreciate it. If you would like it, if you're watching online, hit the subscribe button and all that sort of stuff, wherever you consume it from. If you're getting the audio version, you can get the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. But do share it out. Share it with your friends, your colleagues, and all that sort of stuff. And of course, if you're watching online, you are more than welcome to comment and ask your questions and let us know how you're getting on. That will be great to hear from you as well. On this week's e-commerce podcast, we are digging deep into website analytics. Oh yes. Now, metrics are an integral part of e-commerce because they drive improvements and they help to focus people and resources on all that good stuff, which is important. So today's show is all about the importance of web analytics and how marketeers like you and me and businesses can benefit from them. Now, I think this is going to be quite an interesting episode. I'm not going to lie, because we're going to deep dive into all these things with our special guest, Michael Loban, who is the Chief Growth Officer at InfoTrust, which is a global analytics consulting and data governance company. He is also the co-author of the Amazon best-selling book, Crawl, Walk, Run, Advancing Analytics Maturity with the Google Marketing Platform, i.e., this. In other words, Michael knows his stuff, right? We've got entirely the right chap to come and talk to us about it. And if you're interested in his book, do stick around because we're going to do a bit of a giveaway and we'll let you know at the end how you can get a copy of this for free. Yes, it is a great book. I've actually read it myself. I have lots of notes in this. So you're going to want to get hold of it. So do stick around. Now, when Michael is not motivating organizations to undertake a digital transformation, he can be found passing on the power of digital analytics to the next generation of marketeers and analysts through his roles as term adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati and adjunct faculty at Xavier University. Wow, right? He is also a presenter and contributor writer with work published in Forbes, Adweek, and just basically everywhere, right? So somehow, amongst all of that, he has found the time to come talk to us, which, let me tell you, is no small feat. So you're going to want to grab your notebooks on this one if you can, but if you're driving, if you're running, or doing whatever you do when you consume podcasts, you'll be pleased to know, of course, that all of the notes and transcripts and download links will be available for free on our website. Just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/67 to download them. Okay, so without further ado, I think I'm going to push this button on my desk and we are going to bring Michael into the show. Michael, good evening. How are you doing?
Matt, I'm amazing. Thank you so much for this kind introduction. And I'm always thrilled to talk to anyone who will listen about digital analytics. It's certainly a passion of mine, not analytics itself, but how to make better, smarter decisions with data. So, so pleased to be here.
Oh, it's great that you're here. Tell me, how did you get started in this whole thing, Michael? Right? Did you just? It's not like I kind of picture you, just one day waking up and going, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. How did you get into it?
Certainly. So we got into the business of data probably through data, and what I mean by that, I did not start in analytics measurement. This was not my degree in university. But in the initial stages of my career, I was working on the more marketing side of digital marketing, website development, running advertising campaigns. And then we were looking at the data, and it seems like more and more organizations are increasing their budgets when it comes to digital spend. But yet the answer of how do we measure it, how do we make decisions where to invest, where not to invest, those were not being answered. In fact, I participated in a whole lot of sessions about the website redesigns, launches of new websites, and in those meetings, the question of data was not mentioned once. Right? Wow. So people would look at, here's the new version of the homepage, here's the new version of the landing page, and the question was, well, how do you feel about it? If everyone said, yeah, I feel good about it, it would go live. And to me, it seemed like, well, that's one way to do it, but maybe there is another way to do it. And at that point, I had no idea if it's going to be better or not better, but it seemed that data could, at the very least, make our gut decisions more accurate, right? We can still rely on our gut, but data can definitely help and sharpen our abilities.
Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting you say that, because I think it's a fascinating observation that more and more people are spending more and more money on ads, on just throwing money into that whole marketing budget, because they feel the need to, or they want to drive sales and they want to drive more sales. But then they're not looking at the analysis which comes along with that, the data which comes along with that, and they're not using the data to drive their decisions. I think that's quite a fascinating observation. Was this something that you observed a few years ago, or is this something that you think still happens today?
So I started to observe it obviously earlier in my career, and hence why InfoTrust has started to adopt this as the foundation of the business. But I would say to this day, it's something that still happens. One thing to consider, right? Because initially when we kind of hear this, or the listener might be hearing this, the answer is, well, this just doesn't make sense. Why would anyone not look at analytics? But it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So let's say you're an organization, an enterprise. It doesn't really matter what size you are, and you have, let's say, a budget of $10,000.
Okay.
You are making a decision, right? Do I take that $10,000 and do I spend it on new client acquisition, or do I spend it on selling products to my existing client base, right? So you have $10,000 that you can spend on marketing, or you have to make a decision and say, well, but I can also take that $10,000 and I can invest it into analytics capabilities. And if you say, well, I'm going to invest it into analytics capabilities, you need to determine, well, how am I going to measure if my investment in measurement is actually effective, right?
Yep, I can see the complexity all of a sudden. Yep.
Otherwise, we can say, well, yes, we are spending money on data or analytics, but at the end, if within 6, 9, or 12 months of our investment into data, we still cannot figure out, well, did we actually do better as a result of this investment, then it's not the right type of investment. That's why to this day, it's some organizations find it challenging. It's not that people do not believe that analytics can be powerful. Everyone, I think, believes that, but not many have been able to really connect the dots and see how investment analytics has been able to generate more revenue because they've been able to sell more products by perhaps spending less money on advertising.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I'm making, sorry, I keep looking down because for those of you not regular to the show and are watching on video, I've just lifted up my notebook to the camera as I take copious notes as we go along. And so I'm busy writing away here. So I'm just thinking, if I'm a startup, if I'm a new business, should analytics also be important? Should it be something that I sort of get myself used to doing from day one?
I would start with the word get used to. Yes, if this is a habit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like exercise, right? You do not go out and say, tomorrow I'm going to run a marathon. So nobody is suggesting that if you are just opening up a one-person consulting business or coaching business, so if you're starting a restaurant and you're launching next week, that you should invest $100,000 into analytics practice and buy $150,000 Google Analytics 360 product. That's not what we are talking about. But the question is, well, how can I start developing my analytics habit right now? How can I do the very basic tracking on my website? How can I pay attention to how many emails I send out, how many emails are being opened, what is the click-through rate? I start testing headline email, or if I start testing email, how does this impact those click-through rates? How does this impact then traffic to my website? And then what happens on my website? So that's what we're after. And then as your business continues to grow, because you have this analytics habit, right, you will be able to say, well, I before. Now I'm just going to continue doing more and more, and I'm going to continue investing more dollars into analytics because I know what it can do for me, right? But I would not suggest that, hey, wait until your business is 5 or 10 years old and then start taking advantage of analytics. Start from day one, but certainly do not overspend.
Yeah, that's actually one of the points you raise in the book. I'm just turning to the page here where I underlined it. One of the things that you said in the book. Where are my glasses? Hang on, sorry. I'm getting to that stage where I need glasses. Everyone wants to jump immediately from nascent to multi-moment, but again, optimizing your marketing analytics is a journey, and that was a phrase that I underlined. It is in fact a journey, and it's a continuous journey, isn't it? Where you, like you say, I like that, the habit of analytics. You start with what you can from day one, and you build it, and you expand on it, and you grow, and you always look to data, because that's one of the key benefits of e-commerce is you can get a lot of data, right?
Absolutely. And you get a lot of data because you're directly communicating with your audience. And instead of relying on a third-party platform, Amazon is an amazing company, right? And it's a great platform for many organizations that sell products because they're able to sell through this channel. Mm-hmm. But when you have a direct-to-consumer business, one is you minimize your risk if something were to happen with your store or Amazon or with Amazon model, whatever that might be, and you have a direct relationship with your customer. So you can communicate with them one-on-one. You can launch products, you can announce products, see if those products interest your customers or do not really interest your customers. It's a great way to build a dialogue. And analytics is the way to better understand and measure how people are responding to your messaging, to your communication.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of direct-to-consumer, and we certainly see an uplift, especially over the past year, as people have not been going to stores as much as they were before. the e-commerce business has been just going up and up, and I do not see it slowing down.
No, not anytime soon. That's for sure. It's definitely going to keep going crazy. So when I think, Michael, and I think I'm probably like most people, right? So when I think of analytics, or someone starts talking to me about analytics, the first thing I'm thinking in my head is I need to set up a Google Analytics account, right? I've made that link somehow over the years with Google Analytics and setting that up with my website. Is that a good place to start?
So setting up Google Analytics, I would say, is not really step one, although it's very close to step one. And the reason I say that Google Analytics, it's a tool. And what I mean by that, before you start using any tool, you need a measurement plan. So before you even set up Google Analytics, think about your business. Think about your communication with customer, all of those touch points, and determine, well, what should I be measuring, right? If I have a direct-to-consumer business, well, I want to be measuring how many people come to my website. I want to be measuring how many people buy on my website. I want to be measuring how many people return products back to me, or when I have to issue a refund. I want to measure how many sales come from Facebook, from these marketing channels, right? And when I measure it, I want to be able to see how this changes, evolves, how these numbers evolve over the next months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever that might be, right? And when you have this type of measurement framework for your business, and obviously larger your business, more complex your framework is going to be, then you will make a decision, well, to measure some of these points, I will need Google Analytics. Mm-hmm. For others, I might need another platform. And then you start deploying Google Analytics free, which is an amazing platform. Majority of websites in the world use Google Analytics free. And you might need to say, well, I also need to do better email analytics. I also need to do social media analytics. And then I need to bring all of this data together, even if it's just a very simple spreadsheet or a dashboard where you can track your results.
Wow. Okay. So let me just make sure I've understood this right. Because again, I was, I underline in your book here. Where do you start? Yeah. Where do you start? Simple. You start with purpose, and I like that. So actually, before you start digging into Google Analytics, before you start using any of the tools, create a plan. As in, what are the things that I need to measure? And you talked about a bunch of things there that I need to measure for direct to consumer. Mm-hmm. Figure out what it is that I need to measure, and then understand what's the best tool to measure that for you and your business. And that could be Google Analytics. It could be something a little bit different, but that's the best place to start, is to start with a plan. Because I find that most people, and I'm just trying to think through all of the clients that I've ever worked with over the years, no one has ever had an analytics plan. Everyone just kind of assumes, rightly or wrongly, and I dare say you'll tell me wrongly, but everyone just kind of assumes that I've got a connection to Google Analytics, therefore everything is okay.
I think it's a very accurate observation. Is we substitute tools for strategy. Mm-hmm. So instead of truly understanding what is that we're after when it comes to our connection with the consumer, right? Because at the end of the day, that's all digital marketing is. We want to establish that connection. We want to establish that conversation. And then it yields to traffic to the website. It yields to sales, recurrent sales. But we need to have a plan first for how that will take place. What type of measurement will help us accomplish that? And then we start with tools, we start the solutions. Or you might need to, even before you start using tools, you might need to ask yourself, well, do I actually have the right skill set to do this myself? Or am I at this stage of the business where I need to hire help and somebody to do this for me?
Yeah, that's That's top advice, actually, because I think if the default is I'm just going to turn Google Analytics on and then everything else will be fine, you're probably not thinking I need to go and hire somebody to help me with the analytics, right? But Google Analytics is I tell you what woke me up to this, Michael. A few years ago, we hired a guy. He still works with us now. A guy called Mike. Mike's a great guy. He has a PhD in physics, right? I mean, he is like uber smart, and my son is actually starting to do a degree in physics, and one of the things that surprised me is how much of their degree is doing data analysis. Do you know what I mean? Looking at numbers, especially in theoretical physics. And so for him and his brain, he understood analytics in a way that I don't think anyone else had understood before he came. Do you know what I mean? He could pull things out of the data that no one else could see. And so I wholeheartedly agree. Maybe you need somebody to help you with the data analysis.
Perhaps, right? And there is no right or wrong answer for any business, but that's something that everyone has to make the decision on, right? Is this part of my business something that I want to own and execute on myself? And that's great if so. Or is it something that I need to have a partner to do? Absolutely, also great. So there are many ways to accomplish this, but ultimately, if you want to become data-driven, you need to dedicate time to this. Not just buy tools, but dedicate actual time to this.
Yeah, time to read and understand the data. So how would you...
That's right.
How would you use, so let's say you've got your direct consumer business, you've got your e-commerce website, you're selling stuff. When you talk about letting data drive, I thought it was a wonderful phrase, and I'm going to steal this quote that we use tools to replace strategy. I love that. That's definitely going to, I'm sorry, I'm going to steal it, but I'll give you the credit. That's not a problem. So when it comes to strategy and letting data help drive that strategy, and help quantify our gut feeling, I suppose it's a bit of an open-ended question, but where do I start with that?
Well, let's use an example. Do you have an e-commerce business in mind?
Yeah, sure. We've got an e-commerce business that sells, let's pick Vegetology. So Vegetology sells vitamins and food supplements that are vegan and vegetarian certified. So that's our niche, that's our market.
Excellent. And do you have a goal where you want your business to be before the end of this year?
Yes. Yeah, in terms of turnover, yes, we do.
Okay. In terms of, let's say, top line revenue, stuff like that, right? From the e-commerce standpoint. And I suspect you know where you are right now.
Yes.
Okay. So this means that we have a certain gap, right? That we need to come from where we are right now to where we want to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So based on this, there are a couple of things. The first one is from increasing revenue from whatever it is right now to where it needs to be, the question is, well, what are the key drivers of that revenue? Well, the first thing is I need to get people to my website. So that's one. The second one is when people are on my website, I need to increase the number of people that look at my product pages, right? Because nobody's going to buy vitamin without looking at the product page. When people look at my product page, I need to increase the number of people that click add to cart and then actually complete the shopping process. Then when the person completes the shopping process and buys the product, I want them to come back and I want them to buy another product, right? In your experience, one customer, how many products ideally would you want them to own?
3.
3. Okay. So if you have a group of customers that only bought one, there's an opportunity to upsell them 2 other products, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So what we are doing is instead of simply saying, well, we have this huge goal, which is very important to start with, right? Where let's say we want to grow our revenue 10x. we begin breaking it down into small little steps. Because guess what? Is it easier for us to simply say, well, we're going to increase the revenue 10 times? Or is it easier for me to say, well, we have actually 20 different small levers that we can improve. And if we improve each lever by 1, 2, 3%, we are going to accomplish our goal. And then you can start playing with these levers, right? And you can say, well, while we are working to bring more new people, right, who've never been to our website before, while we work to get them to the website, we also need to work on a email campaign where we get those customers that only purchased one product or two products to buy another product that they've not purchased before. So now we have different, if you will, work streams that we are working on and that we are optimizing on. And throughout this process, you might say, well, it actually does not make sense for me to spend a lot of time on advertising to my existing clients because organically I can grow them. So I'm going to take my budget and I'm going to shift them to generating new customers because guess what? My product is so good that if somebody buys one product, they're going to buy product 2 and product 3 virtually without me spending an extra incremental advertising dollar. So now you're beginning to really shift your advertising dollars, knowing where you need the most, if you will, advertising help versus what you can do just organically. So that's kind of the thought process that I tend to go through when meeting and working with organizations is let's break this down into the smallest number of steps and see how each one we can measure and how we can begin optimizing each one.
That sounds remarkably insightful. Michael is the word I'm looking for. I've always had this thing that I think an e-commerce business focuses too much on the 10x and not enough on the 2-3% like you talk about.
Yes.
And a lot of 2 to 3% across the board they add up massively and quickly. And it's a lot of
compounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the magic of compound interest, isn't it? It's that whole when you work on all these things together, they do compound. And actually, like you say, it's easier to change something 2-3% than it is to think I need 10x. And I love that. I genuinely love that. The powers of the 2-3% type thing. And you talked about some of them. The various different things. And so breaking it down into these 20 steps and then figuring out the metrics for each of those steps and how I can measure those.
And to give you another just lens, right? Because to your point, completely agree. A lot of times we underestimate the power of those 2-3% changes, right? Mm-hmm. We think, well, that's just not sufficient enough, or that's not large enough. I've heard this analogy, so I'm gonna use it and share it with your audience. Imagine you have two airplanes, right? And mm-hmm. they start at the same airport and they go in the same direction. And then one makes a 2% directional change versus the other one. Give them a couple of hours, they're going to end up in completely different locations or spots, right? That's just the one time 2% change. Mm-hmm. Now imagine when you know that you have 20 of those levers, that any business has 10, 20 of those levers that you can work on. You might choose not to work on every one of them at the same time, but you certainly can work on multiple at the same time. Hence, you have so many things going for you if you can just break this process down into small, manageable, tangible steps.
That's fantastic. So in the book, sorry, I keep coming back to your book because I just have lots of questions from reading your book. Its title is Crawl, Walk, Run, which I think is quite apt for anybody who's on the journey. You sort of you say you crawl, then you walk, and then you run. You sort of get bigger and better, don't you, as you go along? I thought it was a beautifully named title.
Thank you.
The subtitle: Advancing Analytics Maturity. What do you mean by this phrase, analytics maturity?
So similar to crawl, walk, run, right? It's the idea that by doing something well, by continuously doing something, by continuously practicing something, we get better. And analytics maturity is really the same thing in terms of that. If I decide I've never done analytics before, and I decide to start tomorrow, chances are what I do is not going to be as advanced as some other organizations that have been doing this from day one, right? If one of your listeners has decided to start e-commerce business, chances are your e-commerce business is not going to work as flawlessly as Amazon does, right? But by making continuous changes, improvements, ultimately you will be able to mature as a business, and your processes are going to be not just, well, let's see if it works. I've never done this before. You will actually know, okay, this works. This is why it works. This is how it works. And this is what we can continue building on. So the maturity is merely that we need to create this analytical muscle where we continuously do this type of work, and the better we become, better results it will yield.
Yeah.
But the book was specifically around Google Marketing Platform because a lot of times we get questions from partners, clients, what solutions should I be using? Because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, solutions that are part of MarTech universe. And we decided, well, let's not write about all of them, but let's focus on Google Marketing Platform, which has an amazing suite of products such as Google Analytics, Google Optimize, Google Tag Manager, and others, and talk about how organization can continuously grow the use of those tools to advance their business.
Yeah, and that was actually, you read my mind, because that was going to be my next question, because you know the rest of the title of the book is Advanced Analytics Maturity with Google Marketing Platform. And actually I found this remarkably helpful for understanding what the Google Marketing Platform was and what it still is. And so for those who are listening to the show who are not familiar with Google Marketing Platform, do you just want to give a brief, I mean, you've talked about some of the tools that are included. So Google Marketing Platform is a headline, is an umbrella for various tools, isn't it? You've mentioned Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Optimize.
Exactly. Google Marketing Platform is a suite of product, and because it is a suite of product developed by Google, products that integrate together very well, and products, many of them that are available for free, or at least there is a free version, such as Google Analytics, right? It's a free product. There is also an enterprise version of the product, such as Google Analytics 360, but a business can use Google Analytics free. Another product, for example, is Google Optimize to run A/B tests on your websites to see if a certain copy performs better than the other copy, or if a product image performs better than another product image. So those are just some examples. And again, the important thing here is because they've all been developed together, they integrate very well. A lot of times what we see with organizations that continuously build their own digital stack and add new products. Yes, those products can also be very powerful, but you always have to be mindful every time you make a decision. I'm going to integrate another solution into my marketing mix. I'm going to integrate another solution. You can certainly do that. And we work with organizations that successfully utilize 20, 30, 40 different tools at the same time. But doing so means that you need to have a very fairly large and very skilled team. Otherwise, you're going to end up building kind of this Frankenstein of a solution that will be very expensive to maintain.
I love that, Frankenstein of a solution. That describes most people's websites right there. Frankenstein of a solution of a site. Yeah, I like that. So Google Analytics, Google Optimize, for your A/B testing. One of the products in this suite, which I've heard a lot about, and maybe you could touch on, because this is actually quite a common question that we get asked. Google Tag Manager, what is it and what does it do?
Sure. So Google Tag Manager is a solution to accomplish a number of things. So if you think about how Google Analytics and similar solutions work, right? It's a pixel, it's a piece of code that is placed on your website.
Mm-hmm.
And by placing that piece of code, you can track certain activities of your consumers on a website. And you have virtually hundreds of solutions that work in a similar fashion, where you have to put this tracking code or you have to put their code on your website.
Mm-hmm.
And so what starts to happen is your IT team, right? Because usually it's not marketing who is making changes to the website, but IT team who is making changes to the website. Now they have to continuously add new tools. They have to remove those tools. They have to edit those, how those tools are deployed. So it becomes quite challenging. So your management system, think of it as a container.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of placing all of those individual codes on your website, you place them in this one container called Tag Manager, and then you put that container on the website. And then somebody who doesn't even have access to your website code can go into this tag management system and can make changes to those individual solutions. So you are minimizing reliance on your IT team to deploy and manage those marketing pixels, marketing technologies. And that's something that quite often we do as a partner for our clients. We manage their tag management systems and hundreds of tags that are deployed throughout those tag management systems.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. When you talk about for those who are listening to the show, just to sort of explain a little bit more. So you have every website is made up of is made up of code. And usually somewhere in that code is a bit of code given to you by your analytics software. For example, there'll be a bit of code which connects to Google Analytics, which your web developer will put in. Or there'll be something in the back end of your CMS that allows you to add that. Facebook pixels would be another one, right? Where you start to add all these, they call them code snippets, and you add all these code snippets to your website. I go into cold shivers when that's maybe 2, 3, or 4, but you're talking about 30, 40, or 100 bits of code interacting with your website. How do you and Tag Manager manages this? Does that mean, because I know if I put 30 snippets of code on my website, it is going to slow down to a halt. Do you know what I mean? It is going to grind down.
So what we've seen from our experiments deploying these tags properly through a tag management system should not seriously impact the performance of the website. Now, some websites take it to the next level, and you might have 50, 60, 70, and in that case, yes, consumer will notice impact, but an average website might have 20, 30 tags, and consumers should not notice that those tags are present on the website, partially just because of how they load. But you're absolutely right. This is a concern. And right now, there is a new, if you will, development in the industry, server-side tag management system. Not to get too technical, but again, the idea is to how do we continuously simplify this tag management ecosystem, and how do we have better governance. So having proper data governance that translates into tag governance, how all of these tags are deployed, who owns all these tags is very important, because it's not just having 20, 30 tags, but a lot of times we do an inventory and then we ask organizations, so who owns each one? Raise your hand, and you will have 5, 6 tags that have been maybe put on the website years ago by somebody who is no longer with the company. Yeah. They are not used for anything. So you have a lot of that purely needs to be taken out and never put back on the website. So data and tag governance is a very important topic.
Wow, that's fascinating. So when you mentioned with there's 2 questions that I still want to sort of clarify a little bit around this Google Marketing Platform.
By all means.
How do I know when to step from the free version to the enterprise version? Do you know what I mean? So there is a bunch of free stuff with Google Marketing Platform, and then there is Google's going to charge you. When do I know that I need to do that?
So there are a couple of answers to this. The first one probably is when you realize, hey, I'm seeing some limits and this is impacting my ability to make decisions. For example, you might say, look, I'm getting way too much traffic to my website and the ability to export raw data is not there for me. Or I'm seeing so much traffic that the data is sampled in Google Analytics so much that it's just not viable. I cannot be looking at 2 or 3% of all the data and that's it. So you're going to start hitting certain limits. And, we have plenty of comparisons. People can visit our website. There's a lot of free resources that compares Google Analytics to enterprise version of Google Analytics. But really, it comes down to not just to those limits, but when you have a marketing question or a hypothesis and you're working to find an answer and you realize I am hitting some limits, right? So your analytics maturity, right, or practices are possibly exceeding what the solution is able to offer you. And at that point, you start looking at what are the other options, and Google Analytics 360 is certainly another option. And right now, we actually are going through this big change. Google is going through this big change of introducing Google Analytics 4, which is their new tracking mechanism for Google Analytics. Right now, it's called Universal Analytics, and this next phase is Google Analytics 4. It's a free product, and actually, we published Chromebook Run Edition 2, which is the next edition of our book, which was expanded quite a bit, and we have a whole separate chapter on Google Analytics 4 and what it does, how it works, and why Google has decided to introduce it.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we came live on air, and the copy of the book that I've got, which came out in October 2020, is currently out of date, and you've revised the book and added this new chapter on Google Analytics 4, which I just think is remarkable. That's how it's funny how quickly you have to adapt and change, isn't it, into these. That's right. Into these things. It's So this whole new chapter which you've added to the book is around Google Analytics 4. We've talked a lot about Google Analytics, Google Marketing Platform. If I'm not a big fan for whatever reason of Google, what are some of the competitors to Google Analytics that are probably worth looking at, do you think?
Well, if you're advertising your business online, you probably can't say no to Google, right? If you're a serious advertiser, right, simply deciding, hey, I'm going to stay at Google, your options are somewhat limited. Yes, you can obviously advertise on Facebook, you can advertise on Instagram, you can advertise across some other platforms, but chances are you're going to be missing a real opportunity if you decide not to advertise on Google. As far as analytics solutions, I would say for a free product, there is nothing really better than Google Analytics. When you are an enterprise, there are other solutions that you can pay for. Obviously, Adobe is probably a big competitor to Google Analytics. But if you're just starting out an e-commerce business, or if it's a couple $1 million in your revenue, I would say continue leveraging Google Analytics. Yes, there are other platforms, but in my opinion, as far as free products, no one comes close in terms of the functionality that will be available to you through Google Analytics.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. It is a remarkable suite of products. There's no doubt about it, and we use it a lot. Michael, what possessed you, right, to actually sit down and write a book? Because it's funny you mentioned that you just wanted to cover just one product, which was Google, and there's nearly 280 pages in just talking about Google. So if you added more products, this was going to be a very thick book. But what? That's right. What caused you to? I'm just curious. What was that process that got you to go, I need to write a book?
A couple of reasons. One is we continuously get a lot of questions that are similar, and we decided to answer them in a kind of comprehensive way. The other one is InfoTrust is a fast-growing organization, but no matter how fast we grow, we only can work with so many clients, and we typically work with large enterprises. But how companies can be using analytics is not really limited to those enterprises, right? Everyone can be doing something to improve their business with analytics. And there are thousands of small e-commerce businesses or people that are just starting an e-commerce business. And we decided, well, why not share our knowledge with those that might not yet be ready to spend a lot of money on analytics, but they want to be better and perhaps they want to start doing some of this themselves. So it was, how do we take what we've learned and what we've been doing for the past 10 years with some of the largest enterprises in the world, most recognizable brands in the world, and how do we take lessons learned and make them available to everyone who is working to market their business, to sell their products online. That was a big motivator for us.
Yeah, that's very good. I have to be honest with you. I'm very grateful for the book. I
appreciate
that. I thought it was very well written and very, very helpful. What do you think? I mean, you've talked a little bit, I suppose, with Google 4 here, but what do you see as some of the changes coming up in 2021, 22 in this whole area?
Well, a couple. I would say three, right? So one is consumer concerns and around privacy. Mm-hmm. Is certainly a very big one, right? Consumers are paying a lot more attention to what information about them is going to be collected. More consumers are using what's maybe considered privacy-safe browsers. So that's one thing to keep in mind is consumers are looking for privacy, for advertisers to take their privacy seriously.
Yeah.
So that means that we need to adjust our not just marketing analytics practices, but overall how we communicate with our consumers. Then we have regulatory changes that are happening. They've been happening in Europe for a while, known as the GDPR, e-privacy, and others. And now they're coming and growing in the United States, such things as California Consumer Privacy Act. And obviously, technology changes. We've been reading about the death of cookies and how the world of marketing technology is going to change. Mm-hmm. So those are the three big pillars of change that I see that all of us have to navigate.
That's really, really fascinating. Where do you think well, let me ask you a question a different way. Do you think it's going to become more and more complex to get data with these changes, the privacy changes, the regulatory changes, the technology changes? Do you think it's going to become more difficult to get the data out?
I do think it will be more difficult, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Right? I distinctly remember a couple of years ago, I was speaking at a conference in Dubai. And I was on a panel with somebody, and the question was around cloud. Should I just start collecting all the data that is possible for me to collect about consumer, or should I be more mindful, if you will, about it? That was a question, mm-hmm. right? And the other person on the panel, they spoke out first, and the response was, collect all you can and then figure it out. And my response was quite different. Right? I did not get in the fight, but I think that's one of the reasons maybe we ended up in this situation is because we collect all the information even without knowing what to do with that data. And is that really a good experience for the consumer? Shouldn't we be more intentional about what we want to collect, why we are collecting it? Shouldn't we share this information with the consumer and give them choice if they want to actually allow us to collect this data. So I think making this process more difficult means that we have to be more intentional, means that we need to have a strategy first before we start using tools for data collection.
Yeah, it comes right back to what you said at the start. It's defining your data strategy, isn't it? And then figuring out the tools, and then understanding the limitations of those tools, and revisiting that and going that I think is very. I agree with your answer. I don't know who said the other one. Collect. If I'm honest with you, the guy that said collect everything, that's probably the answer that I would have said. Do you know what I mean? Just collect everything and figure it out later. But the thing is, we never do. And so actually, the world in which we live, being much more mindful of how we use other people's data, I think is becoming more and more critical. And so, for a smart business person, it's an opportunity, isn't it? It's an opportunity to do things different and right, and in a way that engages your customer, which I'm all for, let me tell you. Michael, listen, I feel like I'm just starting to scratch the surface of my questions, but I want to be mindful of time. If people want to reach out to you, if people want to connect with you, how do they do that? Where can they connect with you from?
Sure. I'm fairly easy to find on LinkedIn. Just search for Michael Loban. My profile is going to come up. Obviously, my book is available on Amazon. If you're interested, I would suggest buying edition 2. It has everything that edition 1 has. And it is expanded with Google Analytics 4 and a couple of other pieces of information. And the other way is you can always visit our company website, infotrust.com, and contact me through the website, or just fill out a contact us form, mentioning that you want to chat with me. But between the website and between LinkedIn, it should be fairly easy to get a hold of me.
Wonderful.
And never hesitate to reach out with any questions. I'm very passionate about the topic, so I'm more than happy to always take the time and just chat with somebody who shares my enthusiasm.
That's very kind of you, and that's definitely my experience. So, Michael, thank you so much for taking time out of your extraordinarily busy schedule to chat with us today. Really, really appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Pleasure all mine. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Well, wasn't he fantastic, Michael? I hope you got a lot out of that, and I hope it sort of started to scratch an itch. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but maybe ignite something in you where analytics is concerned, because I have to be honest with you. When I talk to different e-commerce entrepreneurs and when I look at e-commerce businesses, analytics are always one of the last things on the list. And so if that's you, I would strongly recommend you get hold of Michael's book, edition 2 with the Google Analytics 4, not the edition 1 that I've got. You can actually get a copy of this book for free. We have some free copies in this week's giveaway. All you have to do, if you follow the little ticker thing across the bottom of the page there, if you're watching the video, is go to our website, ecommercepodcast.net/67. Not only will you find all of the links to Michael and the show notes from today's conversation, you will find there a little form, just putting your name and address, submit it, and you may be one of the lucky winners of Michael's book. Having read it, honestly, highly recommended if you want to get your head around these things a little bit more, you want to understand analytics a bit more, you want to understand Google Marketing Platform a bit more, definitely check it out. It is a great book and it will be very, very helpful to you. And read the book, do what I do, scroll in it, write lots of notes, and then get in touch with Michael and ask the questions that come up as a result, and then record it as a podcast and share it with the rest of us, because actually it'll be really interesting. So make sure you do that. A big thanks again to Michael for joining us. All that's left for me to say is a huge thank you for joining us on today's e-commerce podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you consume this content, whether it be audio, whether it be video on YouTube or Facebook. Make sure you stay connected with us, because we do bring out more and more of these free podcasts each and every week, so you can get all of this good stuff to help you grow online. Yes, you can. My name is Matt Edmondson. Thanks for being a part of the show tonight, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the e-commerce podcast with Matt Edmondson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.